How's it going, guys? It's Tony from Canon USA, and thank you so much for tuning in. We're just a few minutes away from going live with Atiba, and if you haven't already, go ahead and register at our main event page where you'll be able to interact with the community and ask Atiba any questions you have throughout the day. Link is in the description. Again, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you guys soon. How's it going, guys? It's Tony from Canon USA, and thank you so much for tuning in. We're just a few minutes away from going live with Atiba, and if you haven't already, go ahead and register at our main event page where you'll be able to interact with the community and ask Atiba any questions you have throughout the day. Link is in the description. Again, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you guys soon. How's it going, guys? It's Tony from Canon USA, and thank you so much for tuning in. We're just a few minutes away from going live with Atiba, and if you haven't already, go ahead and register at our main event page where you'll be able to interact with the community and ask Atiba any questions you have throughout the day. Link is in the description. Again, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you guys soon.
That was sick.
That's done. Oh my God. That sucks. What happens? It's the lens.
Dude.
How's it going, guys? It's Tony from Canon USA, and thank you so much for tuning in. We're just a few minutes away from going live with Atiba, and if you haven't already, go ahead and register at our main event page where you'll be able to interact with the community and ask Atiba any questions you have throughout the day. Link is in the description. Again, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you guys soon.
Hello everyone, and welcome to Canon's Get Up and Go. Thanks for joining us. In a few short minutes, we're going to bring you live to Primitive Skatepark in Los Angeles, where professional skateboard photographer and Canon Explorer of Light, Atiba Jefferson, is going to give you tips and tricks on how to get the best photography possible for action and sports. He's also joined by Heather Krutt, Canon Product Educator. For here in the studio, I'm Drew McCallum, Canon Senior Product Manager at Canon USA. To my left, a man who is basically a legend in the industry, the one and only Rudy Winston.
Oh, Drew, thank you so much for the kind intro. And welcome, everybody. Really, we really are grateful for all of you folks joining in with us. And we really think this is going to give us some great insights and information into a very, very challenging area of photography, that is skateboarding. And Atiba Jefferson is really a master of it. So I'm certainly looking forward to this, and I certainly hope all of you folks are as well.
So you all have that opportunity to ask us questions, as well as Atiba and Heather. We have moderators in our chat, so make sure you hop over to the hop-in link you'll see on your screen here eventually. If you don't see that link, it'll pop up occasionally. If you're watching on Instagram or YouTube or any other live stream, please follow that link to our hop-in channel. We will answer your questions live. We have moderators standing by. We also have representatives from Sammy's Camera in LA to answer your questions about pricing, availability, or anything along that line, sales related. So please ask us questions. We'll do our best to answer those the best we can. For now, how about we go to LA?
Sounds good.
Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to Primitive Skatepark here in Canoga Park, California. Thank you to Drew and Rudy for the introductions, and thank you to everybody watching today. As they said, my name is Heather Crutt, and I am a Canon product educator. Today, I am shooting on the R7 with the RFS 18-150 lens. So as Drew said, if you have any questions, make sure you follow that link that is going to appear on the screen to go to hop in and ask any questions for Atiba or myself. And so with that said, I'm going to actually send it over to Atiba so he can give you his introduction, a little bit about his history and what to expect from today.
Thank you so much, Heather. Thank you, Drew and Rudy. And I really want to say thank you to everyone who's logged in. And I really, really can't express how much. Please feel free to ask questions. That's, I think, this experience is so amazing for me to be able to be live worldwide and be able to connect and, you know, answer your questions. I'm super excited about it. So first of all, my name is Atiba Jefferson. I have been shooting skateboarding since I was in high school. I'm a skater myself, but once I realized I wasn't that good at it, I picked up a camera. And I've been shooting professionally for 30 years now. And have seen it change so much, and have seen photography change so much. Starting in the film days, and then now we're in the digital days, I've been able to progress from, you know, my first camera from high school, which was a Canon Snappy Q, to now what I use, which is an R5. And we're gonna go through, today we're gonna go through all of it. We're gonna go through the flashes, how I set things up, and just, you know, what to do my job. I've shot over 200 covers of magazines, starting with Transworld to the Skateboard Mag, and now Thrasher magazine where I work. But one thing about today that I want you to apply everything to is not just skateboarding, but action. And when I say that, anything moving, whether it was football or basketball or dancing, all of this stuff that I am going to teach you, you can apply to it. And there was a point in my career I learned so much from a great photographer, Grant Britton, who is a master at skateboard photography. But then I assisted a master at basketball photography. His name is Andy Bernstein. He's the Laker and Clipper team photographer. And he taught me so much about flash, strobe, shutter speeds, and the science that I call action photography, and freezing it. So, you know, photography, the biggest thing is a shutter, right? And that is something that captures the image. And there's a speed to that shutter. And for action, we want to be at a high shutter speed to freeze it. 1/2000th for me is the sweet spot. Certain sports, believe it or not, like golf, the way that the club comes through, you want to be at like 4,000, maybe even 8,000. Skateboarding, 2,000 is a sweet spot. Even basketball, which I learned so much about, 2,000 is great. But the minimum is 5,000. One thing I want to stress today is we're going to learn a lot of things. We could call those rules, but rules are made to be broken. And why I say that is because of the creative process. The creative process, once you know what one technique does, you can then do the opposite of that to make something cool. So as much as I'm like 2,000th of a second, that's not always the case. So let's dive into it. This is my bag. This is actually how I roll for skateboarding. Everything is really compact. This is my R5. I love this camera so much. It really is a camera that does everything for a skate photographer, from having a large chip to having fast multiple frames per second. And you can see in here, I pack it pretty tight. We'll go through all my lenses and all that stuff later today. One thing is I'm gonna revisit a lot of things throughout the days because it'll all apply to different situations when we're shooting. So right now, we're gonna really focus on freezing the action and talking about that. But in that process, let's take some time. Let's set up some flashes so you can kind of see. And flashes really, to me, are a key component in freezing action. Once you want to elevate from going with available light, it's really the flash becomes your best friend because you can control your settings, all the options that it does, where it is. And we're shooting indoors today, which is a little bit different than shooting outdoors because we want to be in an environment we can really control things. So kind of lighting in here is a little bit like shooting at night. You're gonna see, I'm gonna build this bracket full of flashes. And this is a technique that isn't the most common, but I like a lot of light. So for me, I'm a little bit spoiled on what I do. This is the Canon EL1. I love this flash so much. And I build this tree of flashes. And the cool thing is you can kind of spin these to also control different areas from a general light source, which sometimes would be just one big flash. But in this instance, it's a whole bunch of them. And this is also something that I thought about. I'm sure someone's done it. But to get a little bit extra, I put this Velcro on there. You want to make sure it's really tight because you'll be moving your flashes to get them right. So right there, we got 4 EL1s. I mean, that's a lot of power. Then I always like to have a miniature tripod too, to put in all kinds of different places. Light stands are great. Skateboards will go flying at you at all times, and we're always living really close to the action. So in that sense, you want to be able to duck and move, but also sandbags. You want to be able to put them down because if the skateboard hits and all your flashes fall over, they could break and you could be out a little bit of money. So almost there. And we're gonna trigger these flashes all remotely. That's the other thing too. So they will be, what I really like is off-camera lighting. But then again, that's a rule that can be broken. There's lots of instances where flash on camera really looks cool and works great. But I think off-camera flash photography gives you a different dynamic. So right now I have my 2470 on. I'm gonna change to what is probably the most trusted lens in skateboarding, and that is a fisheye. And the reason why we love a fisheye is because of the distortion. A key thing and a big mistake that happens in skateboard photography is the fact that you don't show where the skater is coming from. You just trap them up in the sky. And for skateboarders, we like to know if the skater get this high or this high. So if you crop out this line, which we'd call a reference line, you would never know. So, but back to action. So right now, I'm gonna set my camera at a very slow shutter. We're gonna set it at 1/30th of a second. Whoops, sorry. And we are so lucky today to be joined by two amazing pro skateboarders, Deshaun Jordan and Paul Rodriguez. We're gonna start with Deshaun. One other thing, focus. And just so you see, the line right past this, which is probably hard to see without a macro, right past the 3 foot, that is what I call a sweet spot. You can zoom in and check your focus, but I already know where that sweet spot is. That's why I have this tape here. That's what I love. And this is the 8 to 15 EF. I have the adapter. I love this adapter. Everything communicates just the same. But what I do is I tape that. I set it to 14 because that's right before the vignette starts, and that's really wide. And the wider you get, the bigger and more dynamic things get. But like I said, with the fisheye, we get this reference point, but also the distortion of it. It doesn't Frankenstein our subject too much, is what we love. So here. Now, if you look, our exposure, everything looks really good, right? So you'd think like, oh, this is great. Okay, Deshaun, let's get this front side ollie. Right, everything looked clear in there. Now, if you zoom in, it's just a blurry mess. Not good. And the thing about that is that it was 30th of a second, which is really slow. So our subject went past our lens while it was really open. Now, what we need to do, we need to freeze that. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna have my EL1s all the way at max power. I'm gonna set it to high-speed sync. We're not gonna completely talk about flash duration because I could spend 2 hours on that. These are really razor fast. And I'm gonna set my aperture at 5.6. One thing I like to do, just another side tip, when shooting skateboarding, try to avoid not checking action, checking your picture and exposure with them going. Do a test shot. Make sure all your flashes are firing. Sometimes in skating, you only get one try, and you don't want to misfire on anything or go, hey, I forgot to sync it or I forgot to turn it on. So always make sure I'm checking. My exposure's looking a little good. I'm gonna move this flash over just a little bit, get a little shadow. And we'll talk about my flash placement when we're a little bit more open area. This is a very tight area. Yep, everything looks great. All right, ready for you, Deshaun. I'm using the flip out screen. I love the flip out screen. So you see right there, we got the reference point. We see how sharp that is. That is just, that's what we love. That's why we love controlling the light with the flash and freezing it. It's a way to make it razor sharp. And I'm at 2000. So what I want to show you, as much as I love that, it takes away from the ambient light, which later today we will do a photo outside and you see how we compete with the ambient light. But I'm going to now shoot our next photo at 30th of a second. I'm going to turn my flashes down because they are way too strong for this exposure. And why? And actually, now that I think about it, let's go lower than 30th. Let's go to a 5th. I'm going to shoot a test shot. I'm going to go to F8. All right, ready, Deshaun? and I'm gonna pan, because I'm at such an open shutter. And you see that? That is called breaking the rules. And look at those cool swirly lights. This is a technique that you can use at night. You could even, if you really wanted to, you could put your camera on a tripod and just trigger it that way and have everything super sharp. But it's a creative technique that I love to use when shooting with flash. So it's not always, hey, you gotta be at 1/2000. It's knowing your shutter speed and compensating for the available light. But when in doubt, you wanna keep it sharp, go at 2,000th of a second, and you know everything's gonna be sharp. While we are here, I wanna do one other thing. I wanna talk about why this lens, the fisheye lens, looks so good in a lot of situations. So we just saw Deshaun. It looks like when you look at the photo, he's super tall, like in the sense of how high he is from his reference point. Now I'm gonna switch to a long lens. I'm gonna put on, we're just gonna keep switching it up today because we have all these cool lenses. I'm gonna put on my 2870 2.0. I love this lens. It is great. It's just a beast. So, we're gonna show why, at times, I'm gonna shoot just a test shot. Make sure, uh-oh. You gotta love technical difficulties. Pocket Wizard somehow turned off. I mean, not Pocket Wizard, sorry. My STV3 remote. All right, here we go. All right, Deshaun. And you look at that, cool photo, but not as dynamic, you know? He doesn't look as big. You kind of can't tell he's that high in the air compared to the fisheye. The fisheye, when you look at it, he's like in the moon. So for me, you know, there's certain instances. All day today, we're gonna talk about why we like certain lenses in different situations. So cool. I think I would love if there's some questions. Yeah, let's talk about it. If Rudy and Drew have anything for us, or even Heather.
Hey, Atiba. Things look great out there, man. You're killing it already.
We're just started.
We've got lots of questions rolling in. Let's see if we can pick a few here. There's let's see here. I think someone's asking what ISO you're at for, you know, base right here.
Well, the ISO, it can fluctuate. When I'm full power at high speed sync, this is a great question because full power at high speed sync, it will take more light. It eats the light. So 1/2000th compared to 1/60th, which indoors I'm still freezing both. Takes an immense amount more light. So I try and stay at 5.6 with the fisheye. That's kind of a sweet spot. Anything up is just gravy. But at 5.6, I feel like everything is really sharp. So I'm at 500th ISO, and then 1/2000th of a second, and at 5.6. Now, when it slows down and I can add in more ambient, my flashes are no longer at full power. They go to 1/8. I go to 200 ISO at 160 at f8. So I hope that made a lot of sense. The thing with photography in any way, whether it's basketball or portraiture, it's all really a lot of math. So it's you get used to it. You become a calculator.
Atiba, early on, we got a question which is on a little different tack, so to speak. It was from somebody who clearly knows your work and is an admirer of your work. It was a very nice, quick message. But the question they asked was, in a general sense, what is it that keeps you visually inspired?
Oh, okay. This is, I mean, I don't know. I always say I see photos. I see a frame right now. The whole thing that I'm seeing that you're not seeing. But just loving what I do. And I think that's the biggest thing in life, whether it's cooking or music or business. If you're doing what you love, you're always inspired, and you want to wake up to do that. It's something that I can't switch off. I can't explain it, but it's always on, and it makes me happy.
Thank you.
Let's see if we can
Do we
pick out
want to
another one
hand
here.
some? Okay, yeah. Let's ask one more.
Let's see here. Are you shooting rear curtain sync on the slow shutter speed or just regular? Sounds like we just lost his audio, maybe. So I believe in most cases, I think he's shooting regular shutter speed, regular curtain sync. If you really want to drag that shutter and have the action after the drag, you know, where the image is sharper at the other end of the exposure, then you would go into a second curtain sync.
Right, and keep in mind that until the advent of the Speedlight EL1, our top-of-the-line flash unit, and the modified Speedlight transmitter, the version 2, which had been upgraded for wireless flash, we didn't have second curtain sync capability. You had to have just a flash on camera could do second curtain sync. But as soon as you took it off the camera, you couldn't. So if you're a 600EX series user or whatever, you can't do second curtain sync with your flashes off the camera. You certainly can with a single speed light on the camera.
Yeah, that's one of the big advantages to that EL1 speed light. Not to mention, you know, the faster recycle times, the LPEL battery. People are asking, what is the power of the EL1 compared to the 600? They're pretty much the same power. Their guide number is 60 meters and 196 feet. So power-wise, they're really, really similar. It's just some of the functionality and some of the newer cameras and how that works together.
Exactly.
Let's see here. Atiba's back. Here we go. Back to Atiba.
Hey, everybody. Good to be back. Good to be back. So we were talking about rear curtain, right, versus regular. Yes, I go with regular because in skateboarding, the action, I want to know when I hit that shutter, that is triggering my flashes, everything's good to go. So yes, I always, and I'm in mechanical with the R5 when I am triggering my flashes and not in electronic for my shutter.
Awesome. Let's see. Wow, so many questions rolling in. It's hard to actually find one for you. Let's see, let's pause one. Can you?
That's good. Keep the questions coming, people. I love it. Okay, maybe chill.
What is Atiba using to wirelessly sync his flashes? Those are the STE3 Speedlight transmitters.
The STE3 transmitter. It is so great. I love it so much because I am finally able to control everything I need to do with these flashes, from picking separate ones to controlling the power ratio to going from TTL to manual. I mean, these things are so smart and intelligent. I love them to death. And I mean, that's a whole nother thing. I love the Bluetooth wireless trigger for the R5, like all the wireless stuff coming from someone who is so used to being connected to cables. It's just, it's amazing.
We've got one more here for you, Atiba, and then maybe you bounce over to Heather. Do you usually shoot action as a single shot or sequences, or does that depend on using flashes versus not using flashes? That's from Chip.
Well, I wish we had all day for these workshops, because shooting sequences with flashes is a big thing that we used to do back in the day. And yes, I do shoot sequences a lot of times. And later today, we are going to talk about that. So I hope that person logs on, because that is something we are actually about to move on to. So this is probably a good time for me to hand it over to Heather so we can get set up on the next obstacle.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much, Atiba. So, while he is making his way down from the quarter pipe, I'm going to be down here. I want to talk about some autofocusing stuff on the R7. So we have Paul Rodriguez here with us, going to be doing some demo stuff with us. So I just want to run through, like I said, the autofocusing system. So starting off from the top here, you can see the menu here. You're going to see AF operation. And we get two options within this here. We get one shot and we get servo. One shot is going to lock that focus in, and it's not going to continually track. That's where we're going to get our green boxes. So if we have this box over Paul here, you see that green box. Now if I put my hand in front of it, it's not going to try to switch over to that because it's not going to be continually tracking. However, if we go back into this menu here and we go to servo, which is ideally what we want for this sort of thing because it's going to continually track. And we know that because we're going to get the blue boxes up here in the live demo. And if I were to switch my hand here, it's going to try and autofocus in between the two, right? And so from there, once we got that servo locked in, then we need to decide our autofocusing area. Now, ideally, a lot of people will go into whole area autofocus, and this is gonna activate the entire area of focus. So we'll get from edge to edge, and this is okay right now because Paul's the only person in the scene. But if we had other skateboarders running around or there was people out here, it might not be an ideal situation. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to narrow down that area of focus. But I don't wanna go to something like a spot autofocus or a 1 point because it might be too narrow of a focusing point, especially when he starts jumping or doing some tricks for us. So I like to do in the R7 specifically, we have flexible zone AF. Now I'm just gonna pick one because it's the first one here. And the nice thing here is when we go back out to this, we can go to our Q menu. And you'll see here it says AF area. We select the autofocusing button, and now with the dials on the camera, I can select what size I want this flexible zone to be. So I can make the zone as big or as small as I need it to be for my purposes specifically. So I'm just gonna pick maybe a little bit taller because we're doing a little bit the skateboarder, right? But now it's not going to be the full width. Next from there, we have subject tracking. Now subject tracking, I actually have turned off for this purpose because I really want to put the focus on specifically onto Paul, and I don't want it to pick up anything in the background tracking. I just really want it to do primary focus on him. And then I, of course, have people detection on, and then eye detection. So in that case, it'll go eye, face, head, and body in that order because we have the Digic X processor in here, same from the R3 that trickled down into this body. And then I also have activated, I actually switched out the initial priority. Out of the box, it's on 1. I have it set to 0. And the reason for that is when I put that focus onto Paul, if somebody were to skate by in that moment, I don't want it to switch to that person that is going by, right? I want it to stay locked on to the person that I told it to look at first. Then from there, the other thing we can do is the camera's joystick is already active out of the box, and we can speed that up or slow it down as we see fit. So if you actually go into the sensitivity for the autofocusing point selection, we can go +1 or minus. In my case, I have +1 because we got a lot of action happening of movement, and I wanted to be able to quickly make my way around the screen. And also, the last thing is going to be that we have the servo autofocusing. Now, in previous cameras, we had 6 cases, and now we have 4 cases and an auto. An auto is it's going to detect with the deep learning technology in the camera which one it wants to use, right? And so with all that said, I'm going to pick auto because I think it does a really great job for a lot of things. And so if they stop and I want to take a portrait, it works. But if I want to move them around, they're going to move around, we can do that. So before I kick it back over to Atiba, I just want to show you real quickly what this is going to look like. So Paul's just going to we're just pressing halfway while we're focusing, and now we can get that shot. And as we go back in, we can see we got that in focus, right? And we got the action shot. So it looks like Atiba's set up in his next, okay. So before we go to Atiba's next setup, we're going to go to New York and see if they have any questions.
Hey, Heather.
What's going on, Drew?
We've got a question from Blake here for you. Would you recommend flexible zone AF for tracking a single wildlife subject against a relatively simple background?
Yeah, I mean, the flexible area is really nice because you can make it as big or as small as you want. So I like that because if we were to go back into this here and I tell the camera, hey, Q, and I hit this button, I can make this as small as I want. So it gives me a little bit of flexibility rather than a single point. I get the full tracking within that point. So if the bird decides to get up and fly away, or the wildlife is running through the woods, I don't have to try and get that single point over top of my subject, or the little grouping of the points that we see here in the expanded area autofocus. I can go to a zone and I can make that as big or small as I want. And then you tie that onto with the animal detection, and that'll get you the best setup there, I think.
Great setup. I love that setup. It's a really good way to work.
I want to expand on that just for a moment. We've gotten a couple of questions in with noticing Heather changing the size of that flexible zone AF area and asking, well, you know, on an EOS R6 or an R5 or even an EOS R camera, do I have the same thing? It's not exactly the same. What you have with cameras before the R3 and now the R7 and R10 is what we call either zone AF, which is sort of a small square that you can move around the frame manually, but you can't change the size of it, or what we call large zone horizontal or vertical. Once again, a bigger cluster of points, a bigger area, clearly defined, but you can't change the size of it. You can move it up, down, left, right, but you can't change the size of it. The newer cameras with the flexible zone AF areas do allow you to change the size, and that's what Heather was showing you.
Yeah, and I'll add into that is that when we get after this section here that Atiba's going to do, we will then demo his R5 and his setup and why we have it set up that way to kind of play into what we were just talking about.
Let's see if we can get one more question here for you. Maybe we just roll to Atiba here. There's a few coming in. Yep, let's do that.
So you want me to take over? Cool. So the first thing I want to talk about, which we didn't talk about, is in skateboarding, the big thing is picking which side you shoot the skater on. And also just knowing about timing and knowing what you're shooting. There are plenty of things that you could send me out to shoot and I don't know what I'm doing. But the basis that I take from learning skateboarding and other action things is I apply it to it. I shot a dancer recently and I didn't know anything about this improvisational dancing thing, but I just treated it like skateboarding and was able to kind of read the moments. Peak action, that is always the best moment, whether it's a dunk and they're extended or, you know, a run where their feet aren't together but they're spread apart. It's knowing the peak action and knowing which side to be on. So skateboarders, left foot forward, which is this, makes me regular footed. If you do this foot, which is your right foot forward, makes you goofy. So our two skaters are goofy, which I didn't come up with that name. It doesn't sound very nice. I'm not bullying. That's just what they call them. So for them, they are going to be what we call front side. And this is a handrail. So when they're approaching it, this is the best way to kind of know what front side it is. They will be facing it. So we're going to have Deshaun skate the stairs. He's going to be approaching it front side. And you want to know for your composition that they will be chest towards camera, face towards camera, feet towards camera, everything. If we were shooting this photo on that side, we would see nothing. Don't get me wrong, those rules can be broken. They do not have to be that way. But if you want to go with the safest setup, we're going to do that. We're also going to talk about right now focusing. So right now I know when I'm composing this photo, I want to be right there. Timing is everything. I know he's about to ollie the stairs. So I know his peak timing, I don't want him when he's hitting his tail here. I don't want him when he's about to hit the ground here because it looks like he did nothing. I want him at his peak, which will be about here. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna be right there. Let me grab my camera. And I'm gonna purposely use another one of my favorite lenses, and this is the RF 50 1.2. So depth of field is a thing we're gonna talk about. I'm at 1.2, that means my lens is all the way open, right? So depth of field means the depth of what's in focus. I want him peak here. At 1.2, it's probably only a couple inches of being in focus. We're still gonna try and get it right. Now, if I was at f8, my depth of field would be here, and it would be okay for where I focus. So I'm gonna pre-focus. Now, this is something I don't always do, but I do a lot, because in shooting skateboarding, you're quite often sitting down at the same spot. And when I say that, you could be there for hours. So I'll go to my point right here. And what I'll do is pick my focus right in that middle. I'm gonna pre-focus right there. And we talked about shutter speed already. So I'm at 2000, 1.2 at 1000 ISO. So Deshaun, let's get an ollie. Now you will see when we zoom in, to be honest, my focus wasn't that great. I thought earlier it was a little bit better, but it's not that great. And that's why with this lens, and why I really love what's going on. I love a short depth of field, but also we're in a low light situation. So that's why 1.2 lens works great, because the constant battle for action photographers and those who have experience in it, they really know it is such a nightmare to keep a high shutter speed because that acquires a lot of light, the same problem I have with my flashes. So I'm constantly bumping my ISO. Thankfully for these cameras, they are really good in low light. But what we're gonna talk about now is, now I'm gonna go to autofocus, which is something that I've seen change over 30 years, and now it's unbelievable. And what I'm gonna do, and the cool thing is Heather will break it down even more, but I have it on eye detection and people detection. I have what's called back button, and I learned this from Andy. It means the focus only happens, conventionally it's usually on the trigger, but me personally, I love the back button because I know if something gets in the way, I can stop it, it won't get confused. I am controlling the focus at this point, and then I'm picking when I shoot the trigger. So, Deshaun, ready for you. Ollie again, yep. And you will see there, if you zoom in at 1.2, that is razor sharp. And that's available light too. And it's a great exposure, everything is good about that. So for me, I really, really, really love the autofocus on these cameras because they let you do everything. So what we're gonna talk about now is something that I love about these cameras. I'm gonna switch now to my shutter being electronic. I'm going to shoot to high speed setting for frames per second. This is gonna go 20 frames per second. I mean, the R3 does 30, R5 does 20. Either way, I'm in a good situation because if you're ever shooting action, something where you actually don't have the benefit of talking to your subject and going, hey, do this again, you know, it's great to just spray. And when I say spray, just hold that trigger down and shoot, because at how fast the frame rate of these are, and I've seen this happen. I mean, back in the day, in the film days, you would use AA's in there. You would see your camera get slower and slower. You were going through film like crazy. and now it's just megabytes. So it's just amazing. So what we're gonna do here, what I'm gonna do is we're gonna shoot Deshaun kickflip, and I am gonna track him with my autofocus. Because even though the whole sequence, he's gonna be doing a flip trick. For those who don't know skateboarding, his board is actually gonna go in the air and flip, which is hard to catch by eye, but this camera will catch it. But what I really love is that this camera lets me go, hey, I have no distractions of messing up that one moment. It actually lets me pick from a ton of moments. So here, let's see if he does this first try, right? Anyone want to take bets? All right, Deshaun, kickflip. Yeah, we're gonna need a rebate. But you will see as I'm gonna do, I'm gonna rate the really bad photo that normally would be the right setting. But this is what's great is that I can now have an option of just knowing that I am shooting the whole thing. And in skateboarding, we love technical tricks. We love seeing them make. So there's so many different options. So that question earlier, yes, I still shoot sequences. I can sync them with flashes. We're not gonna go over that because we don't have that much time. But yeah, let's give Deshaun another kickflip, see what he can do. All right, ready when you are, Deshaun. And one thing, wow, that, always shoot portraits. Storytell, see this moment? He's happy. Always keep the camera on. You know, I always say it, storytelling is such a big part of photography and action that sometimes always gets overlooked. Shoot the celebration, shoot the defeat. You know, there's always a moment there where it's so amazing to be able to do it. So what we're gonna do is, we're gonna go, I'm gonna rate the really good frame. And this one, once you see it and you zoom in, everything is there. We're razor sharp, our depth of field is short, looking very magical, and we get to choose that exact moment. So, you know, with all these cameras, the R7, the R10, it's so amazing we're at the day and age where before, if a camera was like 5 frames per second, you would miss that perfect moment. So now we get to have that all the time. So I mean, this is all we talked about. 1.2, we talked about knowing the trick, seeing a flip trick happen, pre-focus versus autofocus. So now let's talk to Rudy and Drew and see if y'all have some questions for me.
Hey, Atiba, we got some great questions for you. First one coming in here is, cool. Do you use back button focus method? I know we might lead into this a little bit later, but it's been a lot of questions asked.
Oh yeah. I said it earlier, I love back button. I learned it shooting actually basketball on the court and knowing how to track and knowing where to trigger my camera. And not being nerdy, there was actually working with Andy, we had these remote systems because we were synced to the flashes called droning. And that's when I really learned it was just, I was following the ball and he was triggering my camera. So I didn't know when he was gonna trigger it. So I always had to have my focus on whoever had the ball. Yes, I love back button focus. I can't do without it, you know? Even in shooting portraits, you know, Paul, come down here real quick. Even in shooting portraits, it's really, I find, a really great method in, especially with the eye detection and with this, is me knowing if I'm shooting a portrait of Paul, and right now, I'm gonna open up just a little, look into my lens. Thank you very much, Paul Rodriguez. I will rate one. You will see it's insanely focused on his eye when you zoom in. But for me, the back button works because I can find my focus and then shoot it. So yes, thank you very much, Paul. We'll see you in a second when you grind the handrail. Drew, what do you got for me?
I'll step in and give you one. Jake Kirby asks a question that I think some other people are thinking about as well. We know that for some of your shots with the fisheye, Atiba, that you have pre-focused and set the camera to manual focus. But when you're using the servo autofocus to continually follow on moving subjects, in the case of a Canon camera, which focus case, servo focus case, or cases, plural, are you using?
I am using case 1, the multi-purpose setting. I really like
Excellent.
that one.
And just to clarify, that's primarily for, it'll cover a lot of things, but it's primarily for subjects that are moving at a steady pace. That can be lightning fast or at a walking pace.
Yep. Yeah, I love it. It's just the one that worked the best for me. If it's not broke, don't fix it, right?
So Atiba, I've got one more for you, and maybe you have some experience with this, maybe not, let's find out. Is there any practical application in skateboarding when you'd use the new R3 hyper-fast burst rate, that meaning the up to 195 frame per second setting? He says there's consideration for focus between frames, but have you tried the 195 frame rate yet?
I haven't. And I'm going to be really honest. I just did a 10-day trip in South America, and I brought my R3 because it's a little more versatile when I'm trying to go through action stuff, you know. And to be honest, the 30 frames per second is, I know it sounds like crazy to say, too much at times. So 190 for me, it's so much because 30 frames is already getting it. It's already getting me what I need. Like, don't get me wrong, I think there's moments where that'll be great. But for me, no. 20 is fine because then again, I start editing, I shoot in RAW. I mean, it's wild. But let's keep.
Yeah, that's a case.
Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, that's a case where not every setting
you know,
is
because
really
the thing is,
everything.
I think stuff like that is like when water is involved and splashes and, you know, but for traditional skateboarding, I'm good where I'm at. But that's why I really love how versatile these cameras are now, is because I can make that choice. I just haven't found a situation where I'm like, or breaking glass. If I'm shooting breaking glass or water or something like that, I'm 100% going at 190.
Wow, let's see.
We had another one a little while ago, Atiba, when you were primarily working with your speed lights. And the question was that the techniques you were showing were great, but in situations like the low light indoors scenario you're in now, if you couldn't use flash for whatever reason, what kinds of things would you, what kind of tools and techniques would you use to get the best possible results?
Well, we just kind of did that, to be honest. I would use at least a 2.8 lens. 4s get a little tricky. Like I said, these cameras are so good at pumping ISO up that you can kind of get away with a lot. First thing, if my back was against the wall, I would push it to no lower than 5 minutes of a second. But we just shot Deshaun kickflip and ollie the stairs, available light. There isn't a ton of light. I don't want to say it's bad in here, but it's not like sunlight in any way, shape, or form. So if I have all the tools that I have now, which I'm thankful to Canon for, I will pick a 1.2 lens or my 2870 2.0 all the way open, use my autofocus because I know I don't have a great depth of field, and rock it. I feel totally confident with that. So that's what I would do if I had no speed lights.
Thanks, Atiba. I want to just jump in real quick.
Yeah, of course.
Jose asked a question. Now, we addressed this already, but he said there was a technical glitch and the audio kind of broke up as you were giving the answer to the question. So the question reverts back to the question for Flash about first curtain sync versus second curtain sync.
Right.
And he's just asking if you can just very quickly repeat that answer.
Yes, of course. Jose, I go with regular curtain. I don't use rear curtain because skating or any action that I'm shooting, I need my shutter to trigger right away. So there is no error in that. So yes, I just do that, let the curtain shutter out. You know, the only time you have to think about that is if your exposure is so long that someone's ghosted light streak might affect you, and then you can work back. But no, it's always just normal.
You know, one of the things, Drew, that these kinds of events, and we're really grateful to Heather and Atiba for being with us. One of the things that these kind of events bring up are lots of questions in the modern age about autofocus. Our cameras today in the industry, not just with Canon, but in the industry, are so capable nowadays and can do so many things, but at the same time, it's no longer a matter of just autofocus on or off. Now, it's going to be impossible for us in a few minutes to just sum up everything there is to know about Canon autofocus. But, you know, maybe you can expound on a couple of things that, you know, for a budding sports and action shooter, and that could be somebody doing wildlife, it could be somebody doing skateboarding like Atiba or anything else. You know, a few of the boxes you got to check.
Yeah, I think the first thing you want to go through is don't overthink it. You know, that's point number one. Try not to set so many custom functions up that you lose track of what you did. I'm a big fan of the keep it simple method. And so if I'm out doing wildlife photography, I'm going to try and think, how am I going to predict where the animal might go and what kind of motion am I going to need? Am I going to need to have the bird fly through the whole frame, or do I need to track the bird as they move from A to B? So subject tracking, for example, if I want it to move through the whole frame, I'll turn on subject tracking. That keeps the frame the same frame as a bird moves through. But if I want a single point and just lock in that, I'll turn off subject tracking and just follow the subject through the scene versus it moving all over the place. Sometimes too much tracking can be a detriment to you. So using the tools to really benefit you, not just because the tool's there, but use it in the right method.
The fundamentals start with that decision about, in the case of a Canon camera, and other cameras have the same settings, they just call them different names. But in the case of a Canon camera, one-shot autofocus, which doesn't mean you can take one picture. It means that you're locking focus on a single subject, and at that point, you can take one picture or you could take 100 pictures. It doesn't matter. But focus is saying the same. Or servo autofocus, and again, that's a Canon term, where we are continually follow-focusing on a moving subject. We can be on it with one focusing point, or as Drew described, we can be using a whole area and follow the subject as it moves, left to right, up and down. That's called tracking.
Yeah, and again, keep it simple. Don't go crazy customizing things at first.
Yeah.
Learn the tool, then customize how it works for you.
That's a great point.
So,
I was just going to say, I think we're ready to turn things over to Heather. So we'll go back to our team in LA, and we'll be right here whenever they're ready.
Okay, so thanks guys. I want to go over some of the autofocusing stuff in Atiba's camera. So he is working on the R5 today, and again, we have Paul back over here with us, and there was a request for a kickflip, so we're going to demo that in just a second. But in the meantime, I want to run through his menu system. So I know Drew and Rudy were just talking about customizations and how much you want to customize. This is one of my favorite setups, is how Atiba has his camera set up. So as you can see on the screen here, we have servo autofocusing, because right, that's going to do the tracking and give us the blue boxes. That's the indicator that we know that it's set for that. We also have, this is where it differentiates itself from the R7, right? As we talked about earlier, it's a little bit different in the options that we're going to get on the R5 and the R6 than we get on something like the R7 or the R10. And so while the other cameras, I had it set up on a flexible zone that I was able to customize. This, we have a vertical box, we have a horizontal box, but here, I like face tracking and subject tracking turned on. The next thing we want to make sure that we do is we have people selected, we have eye detection selected, and then we want to go to page 5, and this top option here, initial servo autofocusing point for face tracking. Out of the box, it's set to auto, right? And the thing with this is that it's gonna choose for you whatever's closest to you with the most detail. It's kind of like having a full auto system, but with eye detection and face tracking turned on. What we want to do specifically for a lot of purposes, whether it's action photography, in this case skateboarding, we want to be able to narrow down where the camera is going to start at, right? Because anytime you can take control back and tell the camera what to do, it's going to make things just that more customized for you and more responsive. So I just want to show off the auto first, right? So if we have it set to here, and we can see already, we're getting that eye detection. Now what you're getting on the screen here is you get the arrows on either side, and that means it's picking up both of his eyes, and we can toggle between those two eyes and which one we want to focus on. So if I press halfway, it does a really good job, but if we had multiple skateboarders in here, or we have people walking around behind us, the problem here would be that it might choose somebody else. It might not be exactly what we want it to be. But I can press halfway and lock in that focus, and you can go ahead and we can track him right there. And again, it does a really great job, and we can see that, we can get that action shot still, right? But say if we were, we had a bunch of skateboarders here, right? We really want to narrow down where we're looking at. This initial autofocusing point set for face tracking, now we can tell the camera, we get this little box here. The next thing you need to do here is unlock the joystick control so you can move that single point around, and now we can tell it very specifically where we want it to focus. So I can put that focusing over here if I want to, and it's going to track, and if I move the camera or it moves and it still wants to go on him because he's still a person, right? So, but I can put this over top of him and it's going to face track on him, and we see it going right onto his eye as it should be. But now I can move this around the screen and I get full control even though it's face detection with that tracking mode. So go ahead if you want to do another. So the one thing that we are doing here that Drew and Rudy just mentioned is that we are on our drive mode. We have the high speed, the high burst mode on, and if you one other indicator here is if you see in the top left corner, we have 194 images left on the card, but what you see to the right of that is 52. And this is actually the buffer until the camera, when you start to get that red light on the back, that indicator that, hey, you need a second, that's what that is doing. So if I were to fire off here, I can just fire off a bunch of these, so go ahead. And I can keep going, and I'm already firing off this whole time. And I'll start to know I'm at 14 now. So when that gets down to 0, that's where it'll start to buffer. So you do want to just take note of that as you're shooting in this action sort of stuff happening here. So the other thing I wanted to take a note of is, I know Atiba just mentioned this, but he has his case set to number 1 because of how he's actually shooting within that. And then the other thing you might want to do here is if you go to your, customization menu and you go to page 3 on the R5 and the R6, you'll see customized buttons. And this is where you want to make sure that joystick is unlocked. You go all the way to the bottom and you'll see the joystick is highlighted on the left-hand side of the image of the camera itself. Out of the box, it's set to off. We don't want that. We want to be able to select and move around that focusing point, whether it's a single point or a zone or the face tracking where we have it set up where we can select the initial autofocusing point. Then from here, you have also customizations within the dial. I have mine set to autofocusing type. So if I want to, I can press this halfway and turn that ring on the front of the lens. And I can see in the top right corner, I am changing my actual focusing type. So I can go to a zone really quickly, or I can take that down to a single box if I want to, and then I can go right back to face tracking as I need to. So that is what I have right now. Anything happening? What's going on in New York over there? Any other questions?
Yeah, actually, we do have a few. A good friend of ours, Sergio Vasquez, I think you know Sergio, says, do you use the anti-flicker function when indoors?
Oh, that's a great question. You know, it is a handy feature, especially when we have LED lights running in the background. They like to pick up when you get to the faster shutter speeds. They start to pick up that flicker action happening from the light. So it is definitely a handy tool to utilize, and it might drop down your frames per second by 1 or 2 frames just to compensate for that, and you won't get the images that are either the bands of light going through it or the off coloring, but you can absolutely use it in this case. It would be a great tool.
Yeah, to clarify for our viewers that may not know what the anti-flicker is, when you're working in fairly inconsistent lighting like they're in now, fluorescence, there's a frequency that the lights will flicker at. This will modify your burst in still photography so that you are firing at the peak of that wavelength, and the color and the white balance and everything else will stay consistent, and you won't have exposure differences or white balance differences from shot to shot. Really good question. I think we're ready to go back to Atiba there, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Cool. Thank you. I've missed y'all all way too long. So right now, we are going to have Paul and Deshaun skate the handrail. And we're going to be here for a second because I kind of really want to mix the two conversations we had earlier, starting at the quarter pipe, talking about available light, talking about my flashes. Up there, I was in a very limited space, so I couldn't really, you kind of, sometimes in skateboarding, you never know what the spot is going to be. You never know what the sun is or anything, so you have to be prepared for everything. And that's why I like to bring a lot of versatile lenses, whether it's the 8 to 15 fisheye, the 14 to 35 wide angle, the 24-70 or the 28-70, a 70 to 200, which in here we necessarily won't need, but let's play with it anyways, just to show different angles we can get. So we're going to talk about different angles, and we're going to talk about flash again. So since we've already broke down that they are goofy-footed skaters, which means their right foot is forward, they're going to be facing us. We're shooting this way, right? So you're probably wondering where I would put my flashes. I like to do a thing called trap lighting. And in trap lighting, you're trapping your subject, right? So our first flash will be up here. And as a skate photographer, these tripods are very convenient because you can make one leg a little different in height to see. We're on a bank right now, which is the same as a stair. I've had a lot of flashes fall, a lot of broken equipment because you can't get it on a sturdy flat. So right now, I know they're going front side. Technically, their shoulder's out here. So I want to, this is my subject. I should actually get over here, it'll make more sense. This is my subject. I'm shooting to light up this side of them. Another tool, whenever setting up strobes, and this goes for being in the studio, shooting a portrait, take your aim, look at where you want your flash, and this flash is spreading from here to here. And with the EL1s, I have them set at 24 millimeter spread because I don't want to diffuse them too much because I have such a big posse that I want enough strong light to stop. So I'm going to grab my other tree, we call it. And I'm going to shoot this two different ways, just so you know. This is me trapping it. We're going to use fisheye. We're going to go to a very kind of standard angle when shooting. Standard in a good way, in the sense that we're shooting at the bottom of some stairs, shooting fisheye. Paul, do you want to start with the front board? Okay, give me 1 second. So right now, I kind of like a little atmosphere. So what we've learned is I can slow down my shutter, but because we have flash, that is okay. So I'm going to set my power. Sorry, I am still in electronic mode. I am going to switch to mechanical and make sure I'm not shooting sequence. And then one other thing we're going to talk about too, again, is me going back to my sweet spot. And when you're not comfortable with doing that sweet spot, you can always go to where you're at. This is kind of my pre-focus trick. Go where I'm at, and I zoom in. I need to take it off eye detection. I zoom in, make sure right where he's going is sharp, which it's always going to be if you find that sweet spot, and know I'm good. So cool. Our flashes are good. I'm going to open up to 7-1. Okay, so let's start with the warm-up of Paul. Let's see frontside board slide, Paul. And as you can see, I can already see this is the bane of my existence. I am having a little flare. And that's the one thing. When I'm at this position, the one thing about the fisheye that you always have to be aware of is where your flashes are, because they will shoot back into it. So I already know I don't like this photo, so I'm not going to show you. So I'm going to put it here. That's the other tricky thing about skate photography, is making sure your flashes are not in the way of the skater. And I didn't even break down why I put that flash there. So what I like about that flash is that it's going to hit, and I always make that a little bit higher so there's no shadow. So let's make sure that's out of the way. And the flip out screen, this is something that I love. When this got invented, game changer, because I used to have to be like this on the ground, which sucked. Now, I can just get low, and also be aware of where the board is. If he bails a trick and kicks out, I keep my eyes on him. So, all right, Paul, let's see another front board just to see where I'm at. So, as we see there, no flare, the nice rim on his right side, and the other fill. Now what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna stay in the same position. I'm gonna show you if we bring this for a less moody, dynamic lighting. So all our lights are on one side. Still trapping, but on one side. All right, Paul. Now, if you see, he did cover his arm with it when we zoom in, so you see a little bit. But I tend to like the other one because it's more dynamic. It just has a little, like you get the cross shadows in between him. So I'm gonna show you something you can do to kind of get the best of both worlds. Once again, I'm gonna aim it. This time, I'm gonna go handheld with one. So Paul, another front board. And that way you can kind of get a light fill. So in flash photography, that's why it's so nice to have multiple flashes. I mean, we're talking about a very elevated professional look, but that's why we really get the crispy, very sharp, when you zoom in, imagery. So let's do this. We've kind of broke down flash photography. Sandbags, once again, I'm gonna remind those who tuned in late, always trying to have your sandbag, always trying to have your flash out of the way. Paul, let's go front feeble. So I'm gonna show you how many different angles you can shoot one trick from. And get creative with your angles. See, they don't make it every try. But, like I was saying earlier, sometimes those are still a good photo. Still got the photo. I know it's just a hair of flare. I'll pull this back. holding this out to light like his face. Oops, well, didn't get a photo there. That's what's fun about being live right now. We gotta wait for him to reset, but let's see if Deshaun will nose grind it. Hey, Deshaun, nose grind. What, is that crazy? That's why we have two skaters, folks. I'm gonna slow down my shutter a lot. See? See how quick that was? Nothing hit. He is a professional skater. He's won the X Games, Street League. Hey, that's good for the live stream. Check your focus when you have to move your camera that quick, and make sure your settings are the same. Yeah, you have to do 3 front feebles. Thank you very much. And the flash almost got hit, but we got a photo. We got a photo. All right, let's see what Deshaun has.
17 times the charm.
There we go. So both of these tricks we can shoot from a different angle. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna move my flash over here. Give me 1 second, Paul. I'm gonna move it here. And I'm actually gonna grab one of my favorite tools that comes with the EL1. And instead of going handheld, I love these little tripods. Fit in your bag real easy. So what I always think is a cool angle, and I'm using this, because I know it'll be out of frame, just to give them a little fill on the backside. Let's make sure it's not in their way. And what I'm gonna do now, so real quickly, let's look at the last picture real quick of Deshaun. And we see this angle, and let's go to the last picture of Paul real quick, the one before Deshaun. So you can see both from those angles, we got those photos good. But now, all right, ready when you are, Paul. And ready when you are, Deshaun. We'll talk about both of these angles being different. And if you see, let's first look at Deshaun. You see a whole different perspective of his trick, but it works just as good. And you see what Paul, the same thing. And that's what I really, love about using different angles, because there's always the safe angles, but there's always the different creative angles. So like I said, normally we call click it to huge, because when you're down here, the stairs go up like a mountain. But this angle, you actually see the tail up and the nose grind. You see the back truck and the front feeble. So you get different perspectives. Now what we're gonna do is let's go with a 1435. Now, this is that lens that normally in skateboarding gets a little weird, because it does what we call a Frankenstein effect. And we'll show you why that gets a little bit weird. So give me 1 second to change my lenses. It's my camera cart with all my fun little toys. Normally don't have a camera cart in a field like this, but it's a really nice here at the Primitive Skatepark. So I'm gonna do probably I'm not gonna say a don't, And once again, with this lens, I'm gonna pre-focus. There is no tape spot, but what I do is know that peak action is happening right around here. So I'm gonna focus on this fourth stair. All right. Front feeble. Did you get into that one? No, front board. But you see, it gives a distortion. If you zoom in on the stairs specifically, it gives a whole different perspective. And normally this lens was something I wasn't a big fan of. Hey, Deshaun, nose grind. But where I really love it is horizontally. I love what it does to the lines. Hopefully I don't crop it on a little close. And you see, when you look back at it, it's like the perfect angle with a corrected wide angle versus a fisheye. Now, what we need to use, which we haven't done all day, this is a staple lens for any action shooter. Basketball, skateboarding, surfing, snowboarding. But it's a great lens. Let me get my camera crew to the right. I'm going rogue. And I want to show, once again, I'm going to pre-focus because I know I'm at 6.3 right now. Okay, Paul. I'm going to drag my shutter too a little bit. It's a make. All right, Deshaun. And you really, if you look at those images, you really compress the handrail and you really compress the scene. But once again, there you go. It's like we just shot the same trick from 4 different angles. There's no right or wrong in doing them. The biggest thing about any photography is just being creative and approaching the spot and approaching your shoot with a pre-visualization of what you want to do. But I always go, when I go to a spot like this, I go, my first instinct, what is it? And do exactly the opposite of that. And that challenges me to stay creative and stay fresh and do other things. So I really, love that in any situation, you can get it from so many different angles. The basketball photographer, Andy Bernstein, that I assisted, he did a thing called a system where he'd have like 8 remotes triggering at the same time, and we saw all different angles. So, I'm so glad that we were able to show the different angles. But what I want to show you more is this print we made that fast from the Pro 1000 with the ink and the paper that's 525, roughly. I love this printer. I have one at home. It just prints the most amazing, beautiful prints. So just wanted to share that little moment of what we can do with so many amazing Canon products. So let's, since we kind of did a whole different thing over here compared to being over up at the quarter pipe, Drew, Rudy, you got some questions for me?
Let's see. There was one specifically for Heather, which was why would Heather pick the EOS R7 over the R10? And Atiba will certainly have questions for you in a second.
Cool.
So, great question. I really prefer the R7 over the R10 just because of the ergonomics. I am an R5 shooter normally, and so having the R7, it has very similar ergonomics to that. I also like the fact that we have this new dial around the joystick control, as well as the battery life. It is a bigger battery than what we're going to get in the R10. This is a LPE6NH battery, which matches what's in the R5, the R6, and things along those lines. So I really like the battery life out of it and the performance. Also the size for me, when I'm putting the 18 and 150 is great size on this, but if I do want to put something longer, like 100 to 500, because with the crop factor of this sensor, it's about a 160 to 800 millimeter lens equivalent. And so this the grip is a little bit bigger for me, a little bit better in that way for being able to handhold all of it together. And I also like the fact that I can go up to 30 frames per second if I need to. And also the sensor itself is 32.5 megapixels. So similar image quality that we're gonna get out of the 90D and the M6 Mark II. And I really love the M6 Mark II. It's one of my favorite cameras that we've made. And so for me, I just really like the performance out of this camera. And the R10 does a great job. It's just, just seems to be a better tool for me to use just because of the battery life and things along those lines.
Let's see, we're trying to key up a few more questions here for you guys. I know Atiba's probably changing locations here real quick. Heather, you're working with the 18 to 150, is that what you're working with?
18 to 150 right now. Yeah, the RFS lens, the new lens that came with the that you can get with the R7. And so I really love this lens. It's just been a fantastic option. And I really love the versatility of it because I can go wide if I want to, but then I can go in and get a nice tight shot. So for things like when they're coming down a half pipe or they're standing right here doing tricks right in front of me, I can go a little bit wider if I want to get more of the scene in with me, or if I want to get a little bit tighter and just get them in there. I have the versatility of that right here in one lens.
Heather, I got a question for you, and we get these kind of questions a lot when we talk about cameras, action photography, and so on. Jen Smith asked a question a little while ago to clarify about back button autofocus operation. And the question was, when using back button autofocus with the servo continuous autofocus, are we continuing to hold that back button in as we press the shutter button to shoot pictures, or are we letting up on the back button to fire the shutter button? Assuming a moving subject. So
you're going to want to hold. Right, absolutely. So you're going to want to hold that button as long as you're tracking any subject. So I know Atiba says he uses the AF on button. So anytime you want to track the subject, you want to be pressing that down, and you want to customize that front button to just be metering. So that way you can fire off and get your shutter. So yeah, you're going to want to press and hold that down. And the beauty of AF on is that you can stop and start focusing whenever you need to, right? So maybe the subject stops moving, or maybe they start going again. You can press and hold this in, and it'll continually track, and then you want to do that while you're pressing that shutter button so that it tracks while you're doing that.
So Heather, you are working, I'm bringing this up one more time because we had a good question about it. The 18 to 150 RFS lens was introduced with the R7 and R10. Will that lens work with the EOS R?
Yes, it will. So on the flip side of that, right, it has, because it is an RFS lens and it's meant for the crop sensor R-series cameras, this will actually work on those, but it'll automatically crop down on the sensor that 1.6 times, so you don't get any vignetting or anything along those lines with it. Now, one other thing I'm just going to throw in here, because I think it's important to mention, is that this lens does have a variable aperture. So if you actually read the front of it, it will say 3.5 to 6.3. And what that actually means is that when we're at 18 millimeters, we're at 3.5 on the aperture, but as we zoom into that 150, it falls off to 6.3. So that is something to take note of, especially when we're indoors like this. And we just want to make sure that we're making note of the exposure itself, that the images don't get too dark as we zoom in. And so what I like to do is I'd like to zoom in all the way, set up my entire setup the way I need to, and then zoom back out so I'm ready to go with that shutter speed and things along those lines. And then I can control everything really quickly with the dials on the back here. And I can also customize this front control ring for whatever I need it to be. It could be ISO if I want to quickly change that, or you could do something like auto ISO. And then in the camera system, you can actually limit the auto ISO range. So if you know that there's an ISO you don't like to go to because you feel it gets a little too noisy, you can customize that in camera and say, hey, I don't want you to go above 6400 ISO while I'm shooting. And then you're gonna just have to keep note on the back here that if the camera starts flashing at you some part of the exposure, you need to change your ISO and go a little bit higher or add in more light where you can.
Heather, another follow-up on the EOS R7, the new compact high-performance APS-C camera. Are you seeing any issues with high ISO on the R7? This question is from Eduardo Garcia.
I'm not. Yesterday we were in here doing some testing shots before we got going, and I was going up to, I think, 6400 ISO, no problem. It does look a little bit different than an R5 would, like Atiba shooting, because of the sensor sizes, right? But with that said, the price point that this camera is and all that it packs in, along with the autofocusing, I'm okay with that. You know what I mean? I'm okay with the way the photos look, considering it is a crop sensor camera, because they do look really beautiful.
Great answer there. I think Atiba has changed locations completely, and he's ready to go. Atiba.
Yeah, we are live, and we are outdoors, as you can see. A whole different environment to be out here. Kind of a cramped situation, but I thought it would be really cool to show a different world in the way we light, because the one thing with flash photography, typically I'm outside, and typically it's some light like this where it's very, very, very extremely bright sunlight. We're in Southern California where most of the skating happens. So for us, it's really battling the sun. I'm kind of in a lucky sweet spot right now because we're in this shaded box, so there's not too much direct sun on Deshaun, but I am having this very hot exposed sky. So what I'm doing here now, compared to everything we did inside, because we were controlling the whole environment because it was pretty dark, but now we have to battle the sun. And this is why I have so many of these EL1s to be able to get what I think will be at 500 ISO, 2000. I'm gonna go 6.3 to start. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do a little fill with this, but I'm having a different type of trap lighting. I'm having this, which is pretty close as our key, and then I'm having our other tree, which is back here, be pretty frontal. So because we have these walls and not a lot of space, normally that light would be a little bit more over there. But this is a prime example of something in skateboarding that happens all the time. And that is, we don't know what we're gonna get. And for us, that's, okay, let's adjust to the situation. And that's what I really love about skateboard photography. It's kind of like improv music in the sense of, we don't know what we're gonna get. The ground is really rough, as you will see, and it's not the best situation, but we're gonna make do with it because that's what we do as skateboarders. So I do have my fisheye on. Deshaun is gonna ollie this fire hydrant. So he's gonna go over this fire hydrant. So there's only one peak action that I'm gonna get, but I should be able to get it good because he's gonna go so high over it. But the one thing is, we're back to that pre-focus because we're with the fisheye and there's no need to, battle not knowing where we need to focus it because we know where to focus it. I'm at 14. So I'm gonna do one test. Looks great to me. So Deshaun, whenever you're ready, and I'm very close, just so you know. Not Deshaun, but the people out there on the live stream. Yeah. That's why the flip out screen, I get to keep my eyes on the skater and know to pull back just a little bit. And I got to see what our exposure is. I shoot in RAW so that I'm able to know. I have a little latitude, whoops, Don't mind that. Don't know where that came from. It's raining lens caps. All right. Ready when you are, Deshaun. And you will see in this the focus razor sharp. And for me, when I'm outside, when you're looking at this, what I really love is that you were able to get that darkened sky. And the reason we're able to get that dark sky is because we are able to stop down with the flash. Now let's do one more, Deshaun. And I'm gonna show you what, I'm gonna keep my settings the same. And we were at 500 ISO. So we're gonna have to go all the way to 32, which is about 2.5 stops more on our ISO. We're keeping everything the same. Okay, go ahead, Deshaun. Yeah, that's fine. But you will see when you're looking at this one compared to the last one, how blown out the sky is and how hot it is. So that's why when you go back to the two before, the one before, sorry, you will really see how much more dynamic it looks with the high-speed flash sync. One other thing I want to do while we're out here, which I really like to do, we're going to do one more, Deshaun, but just to show, once again, what I really stress all the time is changing your angle and not just one angle being the right angle. So I'm going to take my 50. 1-2. And this is something that I've been doing lately that I really love to do. And that is, okay, we're gonna put it in autofocus. We are going to probably have to stop down a lot and go with a really high shutter. Let's see what we can get out of this. It's gonna be real fun. Give me 1 second, Deshaun. Right in his way, which is fun. Okay. Give me 1 sec. Okay, ready when you are, Deshaun. And if you look at that, that's with flash at 1-2. And you know, one thing is when action comes at you, it's always really sharp. When it goes side to side, it's harder to get. But for me, I love, when you look at this one, I really, really love that low depth of field. Now, let's do one other thing while we're here. Let's do one more, Deshaun. What I'm gonna do is still be at nice portraits of him walking right there. I'm gonna go to exposure. I'm gonna stop down. Okay, ready when you, actually, hold on, Deshaun. Do what we did inside. I'm gonna go electronic shutter, and I'm gonna go film burst. All right, ready when you are. So if you see, we just did a burst. Available light. I'm gonna rate my peak frame. And you see, we get a whole different lighting. And you know, that's something you could turn black and white, and I think the dynamic. So I really always love shooting so many different ways. One thing in skate photography, because as you see, even if he didn't make the trick and he landed on it and shot out, I still got a frame. So a lot of times, and the beauty of digital versus film was I was like, okay, I got that. Let me switch. So it's giving yourself the options and those varieties, creativity, and just changing that always makes you have such a better select. Sometimes you can be stuck with one angle and keep getting the same thing over and over until they make it, but it's a lot better to know, hey, I got this, let me move to another angle. So that's what we're doing out here. Drew, Rudy, you got any questions for me?
Yeah, I got a really good one, I think, from Michael Santasteven. Michael, I apologize if I butchered your last name. I'm going to read this verbatim. It's a really good question, I think. What's a good resource for learning which skateboard actions are mistakes and should be avoided? And same question about understanding what moves really capture stellar skill. What's a good resource to learn about the skater's movements?
Right, that is a great question. Someone gave me really good advice early on. This is more from a photographer's point of view. Make sure your pictures look as good as the greats that you see doing in this field. So I remember thinking my photos were so good when I started, and then realizing when I compared them to the ones in Thrasher magazine, I was like, these are terrible. So it's really being honest with yourself. But as far as like learning the do's and don'ts, I mean, I'm sure it's online, but I'm saying to look at the other stuff to go, hey, you know, I like things to be different. I'm not saying to copy people, but just make sure you're in the ballpark and in the world. I also would say video games will teach you a lot about stance, tricks, and moments. I was a character in EA Skate 2 and 3, and I actually give you assignments to do. So you could start there.
Thank you so much.
Atiba, I have a question for you here. Johnny Sosa wants to know, can you explain the Frankenstein effect with the 14 to 35 millimeter?
You know what? I could, yes. And I think he's got a very valid point. Hey, Paul, could you come out here? And then could someone grab me my 14 to 35 off the cart? Heather will. No, you're good. I love this question. And to be honest, when I shot the picture of Paul inside, I thought I was going to have that effect more, and it didn't happen. So we're going to show you real quickly when this lens gets delivered what that means. Flying in, thanks. Can I trade you that? Actually?
Oh, yeah, right on.
You can just throw that on the cart. Paul, stand here real quick. Yes, sir. Or actually stand just right here. Step into my studio. We'll add a little flash. See, you always, the cool thing is you always have a flash setup when you're out shooting skating. You always have a studio. So. Don't panic. Oh, wait, sorry. Let me change my shutter back. I'm guessing on my exposure, but. 1 second. Look eyes into lens. Oh gosh, yeah. Okay, stay there. Okay, so let's compare. Let's go back to the first one, that's the wide angle. So I hope you're seeing this. Clearly not a very flattering effect. Now let's go to the next one. That makes them look a lot better. So yes, it's just getting into those corners. And that's the thing when using wide angles, you just know the safe spot to be flattering. So yeah, that's what Frankenstein means. Because Frankenstein had that elongated head.
So
You're good.
one other, yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, that's a great explanation there. The next question we had was, not all of us have the number of flashes that you do. I mean, I think I saw you using, I think, 6 or 8 flashes at one time. 6. Could you tell us?
6 is my sweet spot.
Yeah, what could someone do who only has 1 or 2 flash units? What can they achieve, or what are some ways that they can get closer to what you're doing without 6 flashes?
Well, I think Heather was definitely showing that. But really what it is, you know, I would say the goods, you can do stuff with one flash. I could 100% accomplish what I need with one flash. By no means do you need 6. 2 would be a sweet spot. And the thing is with that, it's not necessarily, you know, you just need power. We could have bigger strobes, like actual strobes that are tons of watts, and you would technically need 1, right? It's really the stopping power against the sun. But it's really just bumping your ISO and opening your aperture. You're still gonna be able to get some light out of them, but the more, the better. I mean, my shooting is, you know, definitely I have a lot of resources that I didn't even have when I started. So it's just being able and being lucky enough to have what I have.
Here's another quick one for you, Atiba. Do you ever use ND, neutral density filters, when shooting outside to deliberately get more shallow depth of field? Shoot with that lens aperture more wide open.
Well, I do. I carry an ND filter specifically for my 2870 2.0, but that is a more video thing in the sense for me, if I'm shooting 24p in video mode and I want to be opened up, but I want to be at 50th of a shutter, that's when the ND. But for me in action, right, shutter is always up. So when I shot Deshaun, I just bump it to 8,000th of a second at 1.2, and I'm usually in a good situation. So I don't require an ND unless I'm really shooting video.
Great, thank you.
So I think we've got time for one more Atiba, and this one's from
Easy.
Niana Drake. I'm so sorry for butchering names, my apologies, but how much editing do you do to the photos?
I mean, of course, like anyone, we edit a little bit, but I'm not in the world of like moving them up or taking the face off this or that. Just really opening shadows and bumping my contrast and, you know, rescuing highlights and whites if need to be. I love Lightroom, so that's what I use. I will process out in Lightroom and then bring it into Photoshop, and if there's some light dodging and burning. I grew up in a darkroom, so I look at Photoshop like a digital darkroom, and I love that.
Awesome. Thanks, Atiba.
Thanks so much, Atiba.
Cool, yeah. Should we hand it over to Heather? Or y'all?
I think we're coming back to New York here.
New York.
Yep, I think so. Welcome to New York, everybody.
Well, this has been really cool. I've learned a lot more about skateboarding.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, for an old guy like me, I'm not necessarily as wired into the craft of skateboarding as some of our listeners might be. But the cool thing is that so much of what Atiba's been talking about can be applied to so many other disciplines, and it isn't just a sports thing. A lot of these lessons are things that you can carry over into other areas. Now, one thing I want to just pick up on the last question, which was about, you know, not everybody can go out and buy the f1.2 lenses or, you know, a half dozen speed lights. Obviously, having access to professional level tools, and in the case of things like speed lights, you know, multiples of them is great. But, you know, if there's one thing, that I think we can carry away from this is, you know, think about the things that you can do. I know I'm echoing some of what Atiba said, but think about some of the things you can do with a single light, you know, where you saw Atiba using the tree with 4 lights on it. Just imagine that we're using 1. And that, you know, you're getting, you know, lights coming in the same direction if you set it up the way he did. And, you know, again, in terms of, you know, cameras and so on, a camera like an EOS R5 is tremendous, of course. But, I mean, you can do this stuff with, you know, an entry-level interchangeable lens camera. Doesn't even have to be, you know, the newest mirrorless camera. You can be using an EOS Rebel or whatever. And a lot of these techniques are still things that you can pull off indoors and outdoors. And of course, outdoors, you know, Drew, I know you'll agree with this. Outdoors, most of the time, to some degree, is going to simplify your task. Because all of a sudden, you know, assuming we're in daylight, the volume of light isn't so much a problem, and we're not having to think stratospheric ISO settings to get a decent exposure.
Right, and we've got your light source that is pretty constant for you. You've got your sun, and pay attention to those angles. Just like you would place a speed light on a tree or a stand or something like that. You can utilize that angle from the sun to work with you. Work with that angle or work against it, shoot into it. Don't be afraid to shoot in for those silhouettes, those starbursts, things like that to make the creative using that. So this has been just a wonderful experience. I've seen so many people that we actually know from previous chats and Get Up and Goes. We've seen a lot of people here, so really happy to see everyone.
I really appreciate the input from all you viewers. Thank you so much. I'm going to turn things back to our team in Los Angeles at this point and let them carry on.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much to everybody that has joined us here today, and thank you to the New York team for all of the questions that you fed us throughout this session. And so before we go, I want to say to the 25 people that will be here tomorrow with us for the in-person workshop, you're actually going to walk away with one of these really awesome red old school Canon logo, the Quantum logo ones that you can see here. And everybody that is coming to the workshop will get one of these. Yeah, with that said, so Atiba, what did you think of today?
Oh, it was amazing. It went way too fast. I can't believe I literally no.
I know.
I had such a good time with everyone. Thank you so much to our skaters, to Sean and Paul. And I hope y'all realize we had two of the best that do it to test on. It makes my job a lot easier and my photos a lot better when you have the best doing it. Thank you to Drew and Rudy in New York, but thank you to all the people that tuned in. You know, as a skate photographer, being able to be a Canon Explorer Light is a dream come true, and to be able to have these opportunities that have never really been an option in my past is just so amazing. I always say I wanted to be a photo teacher, but I somehow keep going as a photographer. I don't know.
Yeah, but you came full circle. Now you're an explorer, and you're literally educating everybody right now.
So I really, it's just fun, you know? I really want to thank Canon so much. I love you to death. And Sammy's, a camera shop I've been shopping at since the 90s, and they know me very well. And, you know, just such a great, amazing opportunity. So thank you. And thank you.
Yeah,
you
thank
were
you, Atiba. This was fantastic.
so awesome as a co-host.
Yeah,
So
thank
let's
you.
do it again.
Yeah, I'll be there.
Cool. Great job, everyone. Don't forget that camera's behind us.
How's it going, guys? Tony here, and welcome to Canon USA.
What's up, everybody? Peter McKinnon here.
Hey everyone, Larry Chen here.
Hi, Vanessa Joy. I'm wedding and portrait photographer.
I'm Erin Bobnick, landscape photographer.
My name is Keith Budzinski.
I'm Laura Jade.
I am Lindsay Weatherspoon.
I'm Rudy Lindsay, and I'm honored to introduce you to the Canon EOS R3.
This camera is wild.
I honestly think I got my favorite shot of the year. I don't even know what to say.
We have a lot of fun content in store for you. Subscribe, and we'll see you soon.